Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world that feels impossibly distant, yet strangely familiar. A place where you could sit on a wooden seat over a clay pipe and let a gentle stream of rainwater wash everything away, a flush toilet over 3,500 years ago. It's the kind of detail that makes you pause, maybe smile a little, because it sounds like something from a modern hotel, not a Bronze Age palace on the island of Crete. But that's exactly where we're going. To a civilization that had comforts and small luxuries that wouldn't be seen again for millennia. And we're going to wander through a single day there, slowly, letting the light and the sounds and the textures settle around you like a soft blanket. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy these quiet journeys through history. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I always love seeing the little map of the world that forms in the comments. All these people in different time zones, all winding down together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, settle into your blanket, and let's ease into tonight's story together. Picture yourself on the island of Crete, not the Crete of today with its whitewashed villages and sunburned tourists, but the Crete of the Minoans, roughly 3,600 years ago. The air is warm and carries a faint tang of sea salt, mixed with something greener, a little sharper, cypress trees, maybe, or the wild thyme that grows in the rocky hills. You're in a townhouse, not a humble little dwelling, but a multi-story building, one of many clustered together in a town like Knossos or Akrotiri, where the streets are paved and the houses rise 2 or 3 stories high, with flat roofs where you can sleep on hot summers. The walls are made of dressed stone and timber, and as you walk through the entrance, the first thing you notice is the light. It doesn't just come through windows. It comes from above, from a light well, a vertical shaft that cuts through the heart of the house, bringing sunshine deep into the rooms. The effect is like standing in a quiet courtyard. But you're indoors, and the light falls in a soft, golden column, illuminating a fresco on the wall, a fresco of leaping dolphins, their bodies curved in mid-air, painted in blues and ochres that still look fresh after all these centuries. The dolphins seem to swim through the plaster, their eyes bright, their fins swept back, and the background is a wash of pale blue that mimics the sea just a few hundred yards away. You can almost hear the gentle slap of waves against the shore, a sound that would have been a constant, soothing presence in the background of daily life. The Minoans loved the sea, and they brought it into their homes. The dolphin fresco isn't just decoration. It's a reminder of the world outside, a world they moved through with astonishing ease, in ships that carried olive oil and pottery and ideas across the Mediterranean. But right now, you're not thinking about trade routes. You're thinking about how cool the floor feels under your bare feet, made of smooth gypsum or packed earth, and how the light well creates a gentle draft that stirs the air, keeping the room fresh, even in the heat of the afternoon. The light shifts as a cloud passes overhead, and the dolphins seem to flicker, as if they're really swimming. You take a deep breath, and the air smells of cypress wood from the ceiling beams, a clean, resinous scent that mingles with the salt, and a faint hint of something floral, perhaps oil of lilies or saffron, used to scent the air or anoint the skin. It's a sensory world that feels deliberate, crafted, a place where comfort was not an afterthought, but a central part of the design. Now, let's move to a different part of the house, a part that might surprise you even more. You walk down a short corridor, your hand brushing against a wall that's been plastered smooth and painted with a simple geometric border. And you come to a small room. There's a wooden seat, polished smooth by use, set over a clay pipe that disappears into the floor. Above it, a cistern on the roof collects rainwater. And when you're finished, you simply pour a little water from a jug, or perhaps a mechanism releases a gentle flow from the cistern, and everything washes away, down the pipe, into a sophisticated drainage system that runs beneath the streets. This is a flush toilet, 3,500 years ago. The clay pipe is carefully fitted, the joints sealed, and the slope is just right so that the water carries the waste away without any fuss. The drainage system connects to a larger network with stone channels and settling basins, and eventually the water flows out to the fields, where it nourishes the olive trees and the grapevines. It's a closed loop, a quiet, efficient cycle that would not be seen again in Europe until the 19th century, and even then, only in the homes of the very wealthy. But here, in Minoan Crete, it was part of the fabric of the town, a matter of public health and private dignity. You sit on that wooden seat, and the wood is warm from the day, slightly worn at the edges. The room is small but not cramped, with a little window high up that lets in a sliver of light and a breath of air. You can hear the faint trickle of water somewhere in the walls, a sound as soothing as a garden fountain. There's no rush, no discomfort. When you're done, you pour a dipper of water from a clay jar, and the water swirls down, carrying everything with it, and the pipe gurgles softly, a sound that would have been as ordinary to a Minoan as the hum of a refrigerator is to us. You wash your hands in a basin, the water cool and scented with a few drops of olive oil infused with herbs, and you dry them on a piece of soft linen. The whole experience is so ordinary, so civilized, that it's easy to forget you're in the Bronze Age. But that's the thing about the Minoans. They didn't see comfort as a luxury reserved for the gods or the kings. They built it into their daily lives for ordinary people in ordinary houses. Now, let's step back into the main room, where the light well is still pouring sunshine onto the dolphin fresco. The day is moving toward late afternoon, and the light has taken on a honeyed quality, deepening the blues and making the dolphins' backs gleam. You settle onto a low bench, perhaps covered with a woven cushion, and you notice something on your finger. It's a ring, a sealstone ring, carved from a piece of agate so fine that it feels almost like glass, but warmer, smoother. You hold it up to the light, and the carving is so detailed that it takes your breath away. It's a miniature scene, no bigger than your thumbnail, of a warrior in the heat of battle. You can see the muscles in his thighs, the curve of his shield, the tension in his arm as he thrusts a spear. Every line is crisp, every detail precise, as if the artist had a magnifying glass, though of course they didn't. They had only their eyes, their hands, and a set of tiny bronze tools, and yet they created a masterpiece that you can wear on your finger. The agate is a warm, translucent brown, with bands of cream and honey that the carver used to give depth to the warrior's body, so that the muscles seem to flex under the skin. When you turn the ring, the light catches the carving differently, and the warrior seems to move, a tiny, frozen drama that you can carry with you everywhere. This ring is not just a piece of jewelry, it's a seal, used to stamp clay and mark ownership, to sign documents and secure storage jars. But it's also a work of art, a personal treasure that would have been worn every day, felt against the skin, admired in quiet moments. Imagine the weight of it on your finger, the way the agate warms to your body temperature, the way you might rub your thumb over the carving absent-mindedly while you think. The detail is so fine that scholars today still marvel at it, using microscopes to see the individual strokes of the carver's tool. There's a whole world in that tiny space, the warrior's helmet, the folds of his tunic, the veins on the back of his hand. It's a reminder that the Minoans didn't just value function, they valued beauty, and they wove it into the smallest, most intimate objects of their lives. As the afternoon fades, the light well begins to dim, and the dolphins on the wall seem to swim into shadow. The air cools, and you can smell the sea more strongly now, a damp, briny scent that drifts in through the windows. Somewhere outside, a bird calls, a soft, liquid note that echoes off the stone walls. You might walk up to the roof, where the flat terrace is still warm from the sun, and look out over the town. The houses are clustered together, their roofs a patchwork of terraces and light wells, and beyond them, the sea stretches out, a deep, darkening blue. The sound of the waves is a constant murmur, a lullaby that has been playing for millennia. You can see the harbour, where the ships are drawn up on the beach, their hulls painted with eyes to ward off evil, their masts bare. The town is quiet now, the day's work done, and the smell of cooking fires drifts up, a mix of wood smoke and roasting fish and something sweet, maybe honey cakes. It's a moment of perfect peace, a moment that feels suspended in time. And as you stand there, with the ring on your finger and the memory of the dolphins still dancing behind your eyes, you might think about how easy it is to imagine the past as a place of hardship and grime, a place where comfort was a distant dream. But the Minoans remind us that it wasn't always so. They had flush toilets and light wells and exquisite miniature art, and they lived in a world that was, in many ways, as rich and as comfortable as our own. They understood that a home should be a place of light and air and beauty, that a simple act like washing your hands could be a small pleasure, that a ring could be a universe in miniature. And as the first stars begin to appear in the deepening sky, you might feel a quiet sense of connection, a thread that stretches across the centuries, tying you to that person on the roof, watching the same sea, feeling the same breeze, and letting the day slip gently away into sleep. Now, as the last light fades from that rooftop over the sea, let your imagination drift inland, away from the island breezes and the memory of tiny carved seals, and toward the mainland of Greece itself. In the age of Pericles and Socrates, of bustling marketplaces and olive groves shimmering in the heat. Picture yourself not as a visitor to a palace, but as someone who belongs here, walking home through the streets of a classical city as the afternoon begins to soften. The sun is still high enough to cast sharp shadows, but the worst of the day's warmth is already draining away into the stone. You turn a corner, and the first thing you notice is the light. It's not just bright, it's almost physical, a soft, white glow that seems to bounce off every surface, wrapping the world in a gentle radiance. The houses on either side of you are not the weathered ruins you might have seen in photographs, all bare rock and dusty brown. They are alive with colour, but a colour so pure and simple it feels like a kind of silence. They are whitewashed with lime, a fresh, chalky coating that covers the stone and mud brick walls, and in the golden afternoon light, the whole street seems to glow from within. Walking through these narrow, winding lanes, you'd see a dazzling white cityscape that felt clean and bright, like a village of sugar cubes tumbling down the hillside under the impossibly blue sky. The lime wash wasn't just for beauty, though it was certainly beautiful. It reflected the fierce Mediterranean sun, bouncing the heat back into the air and keeping the interiors deliciously cool, a simple, ingenious trick of physics that made every home a refuge. You can almost smell it, a faint, clean mineral scent, like the air after a rainstorm on dry earth, mingling with the distant tang of the sea and the closer, earthier aroma of donkeys and cooking fires. You pause for a moment at a heavy wooden door set into a plain, windowless wall. From the outside, a Greek house gave away very little. The walls facing the street were mostly blank, perhaps with a small, high window or two, but nothing that invited a stranger's gaze. Privacy was a quiet luxury, and the real life of the home was turned inward, away from the noise and dust of the public world. You push the door open, and the transition is so complete it's like stepping from one dream into another. The noise of the street, the cries of vendors, the clatter of a potter's wheel, the laughter of children chasing a hoop, simply melts away, replaced by a profound rustling quiet. You are standing in the heart of the house, the central courtyard. This was the soul of the Greek home, an outdoor living room open to the sky. Your house opened onto a sun-dappled courtyard where you'd eat, weave, and nap under a fig tree, the sound of a trickling fountain masking the city noise. The floor beneath your feet is packed earth, or perhaps paved with smooth pebbles, and in the center, a small circular cistern catches the rainwater that sluices down from the terracotta roof tiles. A tiny fountain, no more than a trickle of water from a stone spout, plays a quiet, liquid melody, its coolness a balm in the dry air. The fig tree, its broad, hand-shaped leaves casting a shifting mosaic of shade, stands in one corner, and you can see the small green fruits beginning to swell with the promise of late summer sweetness. Pots of fragrant herbs, rosemary, oregano, thyme, line the edges, releasing their scent as you brush past them. This was not a dead space, a mere light well, but a room in every sense, the place where the household gathered. On a hot afternoon, you might find a loom set up in the shade, the vertical threads weighted with little clay spools, and the lady of the house working the shuttle back and forth in a rhythm as old as storytelling. Children would play here with knucklebones or tiny clay animals, their games lit by the sun, and watched over by a small household altar tucked into a niche, where a wisp of incense might still be curling into the air. The courtyard was the home's lungs, its heart, its eyes, drawing in light and air and distributing them to the rooms that clustered around it like chicks around a hen. From the courtyard, you can step into any of the surrounding rooms, and here too, the design was far more thoughtful than the bare ruins might suggest. In a city like Olynthus, up in the north of Greece, you'd live in a well-planned neighborhood with wide, straight streets, your house connected to a city sewer, and a dedicated room for cooking. No smoky one-room living. The grid plan of Olynthus, laid out in the 5th century before the Common Era, was a marvel of practical urban thinking. The streets were not the haphazard, twisting alleys of older cities, but broad, straight avenues, roughly 5 meters wide, intersecting at right angles to create uniform blocks. Each block was divided into 10 equal plots, and on each plot stood a house built to a similar, sensible design, though the families inside would adapt and decorate them to their own tastes. It was, in its own way, a kind of ancient suburb, with standardized housing, proper drainage, and a level of domestic comfort that would not be seen again on such a scale for a very long time. The kitchen, for instance, was a real room, often with a chimney or a smoke vent, and a stone hearth where a fire could be lit without filling the entire house with acrid fumes. You might see a bronze cauldron hanging from a tripod, a clay oven shaped like a beehive for baking bread, and shelves holding amphorae of olive oil and wine, their pointed bases set into the earthen floor to keep them steady. The floor itself might be of hard-packed clay, but in some homes it was paved with flat stones, and a drain in the corner carried wastewater out to the street sewer, a quiet, unseen network that kept the neighborhood fresh. But perhaps the most astonishing touch of comfort, a luxury so advanced it feels almost like a whisper from a much later age, was the warmth underfoot. In some grand buildings, you could walk on warm marble floors heated by a hidden furnace below, a luxury not seen again in Europe for 1,000 years. The Greeks called it a hypocaust, and while we often associate it with the Romans, who perfected and spread it across their empire, the seed of the idea was already here, in the classical Greek world, as early as the 4th century before the Common Era. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, one of the wonders of the ancient world, had hypocausts warming its vast marble floors. A gentle, radiant heat that rose from a furnace, stoked in a basement chamber. Its hot gases channeled through a maze of brick pillars and clay pipes beneath the floor slabs. Now, your own home might not have had such a system. It was a feature of public baths and wealthy estates. But the principle was known, and in a particularly fine house, you might have experienced the quiet miracle of stepping onto a floor that was not cold stone, but pleasantly, mysteriously warm, as if the earth itself had a fever. Imagine it. On a chilly winter morning, with a rare frost silvering the fig tree in the courtyard, you walk barefoot across the andron, the men's dining room, and the floor greets you with a subtle, enveloping heat that climbs up through your soles and loosens the stiffness in your joints. The furnace, somewhere below, would be tended by a servant who fed it with olive pits and dried brush, and the smoke would escape through a flue hidden in the wall, never touching the air you breathed. It was a quiet, almost invisible comfort, a warmth without a visible fire, and it speaks of a culture that thought deeply about the art of living well. Now let's linger in that andron for a moment, because it was a room with a very particular purpose, and it tells us something lovely about the Greek approach to pleasure. You'd enter a room with a stunning pebble mosaic of Dionysus, recline on a couch, and feel the cool breeze from a courtyard door, a dedicated party space. The andron was the men's dining room, the setting for the symposium, that quintessentially Greek evening of wine, poetry, and philosophical conversation. It was often the most decorated room in the house, and its design was cleverly asymmetrical. The floor was not flat. Around the edges, it was raised in a low, continuous platform about the height of a step, and on this platform the dining couches were arranged, their heads toward the walls, their feet pointing inward. The center of the room was a sunken square, and it was here that the magic lay. In a well-appointed home, this central panel was a mosaic, not of cut tesserae like the later Roman ones, but of natural pebbles, carefully selected for their color and shape, set into a bed of mortar to create a picture. You might see a scene of Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy, reclining on a panther, or a pair of dolphins leaping through stylized waves, or a geometric pattern of meanders and rosettes that seemed to dance in the flickering light of oil lamps. The mosaic was not just a floor, it was a conversation piece, a thing of beauty to be admired as you sipped your watered wine. And because the andron was often placed in a corner of the house, with a door opening directly onto the courtyard, you could feel the cool evening breeze drifting in, carrying the scent of jasmine and the sound of the fountain. The couches themselves were spread with soft woolen blankets and cushions, and the low tables before them held the cups and mixing bowls, the wine coolers, and the little dishes of olives and figs. It was a room designed for a very specific kind of happiness. The happiness of good company, of minds meeting in a space that was both intimate and beautiful. But the house was not just for parties. It was a place of quiet, daily rhythms, and the courtyard was the stage for most of them. In the morning, the sun would creep over the roof tiles and spill into the open space, and the household would stir. You might hear the soft whisk of a broom made of twigs, sweeping the pebbled floor, and the splash of water from the cistern as a servant filled a bronze basin. The smell of baking bread would drift from the kitchen, a warm, yeasty scent that mingled with the cool, green smell of the fig leaves. The women of the house would gather in the courtyard to spin wool, their distaffs tucked under their arms, their fingers drawing out the thread in a motion so practiced, it looked like a kind of meditation. The men might be out in the fields or the agora, but the house itself was a world of its own, a small, self-contained universe of light and shadow. And as the day grew hot, the shutters on the windows, those few, small windows that faced the street, would be closed, and the house would settle into a drowsy, shaded stillness. The whitewashed walls did their quiet work, reflecting the sun's glare, and the rooms around the courtyard remained dim and cool, like a cave by the sea. You might take a siesta on a simple wooden bed, its ropes strung with a woven mat, and listen to the distant, muted sounds of the city, the cooing of doves, the faint, rhythmic chink of a stonemason's chisel, all softened by the thick walls and the rustle of the fig tree. And when the afternoon began to wane, the house would come alive again. The courtyard, now in shadow, became the perfect place for the evening meal. A small, portable brazier might be lit, its charcoal glowing a soft orange, and a pot of lentil soup would simmer gently, sending up a savory steam. You'd sit on a low stool or a cushion, a bowl in your hand, and watch the square of sky above you turn from blue to gold to a deep, velvety purple, the first stars pricking through like tiny holes in a dark cloth. The fountain would still be trickling, a constant, soothing presence, and the household altar, with its small painted figurine of a protective deity, would catch the last light of the day. This was the Greek home, not a dark, primitive hut, but a carefully calibrated instrument for living, a machine for making comfort out of sunlight and water and stone. The whitewash, the courtyard, the drainage, the warm floors, the mosaic. All of it was in service of a life that was, in its own way, deeply civilized, attuned to the rhythms of the body and the seasons. As the night deepens and the air grows cooler, you might pull a woolen cloak around your shoulders and linger a little longer in the courtyard, listening to the city settle into sleep. The streets outside are quiet now, the white walls of the neighboring houses glowing faintly in the starlight, like a cluster of pale, sleeping creatures. The fountain's trickle is the only sound, a soft, liquid whisper that seems to be telling you something about the nature of time, about the way a home can hold a life, can cradle it in light and warmth and beauty. And as you finally rise and make your way to your sleeping chamber, a small, simple room off the courtyard, you carry with you the sense of having been held all day by a house that was designed not just to shelter the body, but to soothe the soul. The bed is simple, the mattress stuffed with wool, the pillow a smooth, curved piece of wood. And as you lie down and close your eyes, the last thing you feel is the memory of the warm floor under your feet, the cool breeze from the courtyard, and the quiet, steady presence of the white walls, standing guard against the night. Imagine, now, that the first thing you feel is not the jolt of an alarm, but the soft, grey light of early morning filtering through the high, small window of your sleeping chamber. The air is still cool, carrying the faint, clean scent of the lime-washed walls. And from somewhere beyond the courtyard, you hear the gentle, persistent cooing of doves. A sound so woven into the fabric of the city that it almost becomes a kind of silence itself. You stretch, the wool-stuffed mattress yielding comfortably beneath you, and as you rise, the day doesn't rush at you. It simply waits, patient and unhurried, like a guest who knows they are welcome. Before you even think of leaving the house, there is the quiet ritual of the first meal. The Greeks have a word for it, akrotisma, but you don't need to know the name to appreciate its simple, grounding pleasure. Picture a small, unglazed terracotta bowl, and in it, a heel of yesterday's barley bread. Dense, nutty, and a little rough on the tongue. You dip it into a cup of wine, but not the wine you might imagine from a modern glass. This is a rustic, country wine, already softened and mellowed by the day before, and you pour a little fresh water into it, just enough to take the edge off its morning sharpness. The bread soaks up the liquid, turning into a sweet, tangy mush that tastes of the earth and the sun. Alongside it, you might have a couple of ripe figs, their skin a deep, dusty purple, ready to split open at the slightest pressure to reveal a jammy, seed-filled heart. Or, perhaps a few olives, the dark, wrinkled kind we still call kalamata, their flesh rich and almost buttery, with a pleasant bitterness that lingers on the palate. This is not a breakfast of hurried bites and paper wrappers. It is a moment of stillness, a gentle waking of the stomach, eaten while standing by the courtyard's edge, watching the first sunlight touch the top of the wall and listening to the house come alive around you. Now, as the morning warms and the city stirs, you might decide to wander out into the streets. And here, the soundscape shifts and blooms. The cooing of doves is joined by the distant rhythmic clang of a bronze smith's hammer, a sound like a muffled bell, and the rising hum of voices. But the most inviting noise, the one that seems to curl through the air like a beckoning finger, is the cry of the street vendors. You can almost hear it now. A man's voice, full of theatrical gusto, shouting, hot bread, fresh from the oven." Or another, advertising a bubbling pot of something savory. The agora, the great marketplace, is not just a place for buying pottery and sandals. It is a living, breathing food court, and the concept of grabbing a quick, hot snack from a stall is as familiar to an Athenian as any modern food truck. Imagine you follow the scent of wood smoke and cumin to a vendor who has set up a large bronze tripod over a charcoal fire. He ladles out a steaming bowl of lentil soup, thick and hearty, with a glint of olive oil on the surface, and hands it to you with a hunk of bread. You can stand right there, in the shade of a colonnade, and eat it while watching the crowds flow past. Philosophers in animated debate, merchants weighing out spices, a farmer leading a donkey laden with panniers of vegetables. Or, if your taste leans towards something more substantial, you might find a stall selling small, sizzling sausages, spitting and crackling over the coals, or fried fish, so fresh they taste of the sea, their skin crisped to a golden brown. The experience is immediate, sensory, and deeply communal. You are not isolated in a bubble of convenience. You are eating in the middle of the world, and the world is eating with you. But the true heart of Greek dining, the place where time slows to a luxurious crawl, is the reclining feast. As the afternoon fades and the heat of the day gives way to a cooler, lavender dusk, you receive an invitation to a friend's home for dinner. This is not a formal, sit-up-straight affair. When you arrive, you are led to a room where the centerpiece is not a high table and chairs, but a series of low, wooden couches arranged in a U-shape around the walls. Each couch is piled with soft, wool-stuffed mattresses and cushions, and you are invited to recline. Now, there is an art to this. You don't just flop down any which way. You ease yourself onto the couch, lying on your left side, propping your upper body on your left elbow, leaving your right hand free to eat. The position is so naturally comfortable, so utterly relaxed, that you feel the day's remaining tension simply drain out of you and into the soft wool. A low, three-legged table is placed before you, and on it, the food arrives in a leisurely, unhurried procession. There are no individual plates. Instead, you reach forward with your right hand and pluck what you fancy from the shared dishes, a gesture that feels both intimate and civilized, a quiet acknowledgement of friendship. The meal itself is a celebration of the sea. The Greeks are a people who live with the water always in sight, and their love for seafood is profound. A servant sets down a platter of grilled octopus, the tentacles charred in stripes from the grill, glistening with a drizzle of the finest olive oil and a scattering of wild oregano. The scent is intoxicating, briny, smoky, and herbal all at once. You tear off a tender piece with your fingers, and it tastes of the deep ocean, yet the flesh is surprisingly delicate, almost sweet. Alongside it, there might be squid, stuffed with cheese and herbs, or the spiny, mysterious shells of sea urchins, their bright orange roe a taste of pure, concentrated sea. And over many dishes, the cook has drizzled a sauce that is the secret heartbeat of Greek cuisine. Gyros. This is a fermented fish sauce, made from the tiny, oily fish that the sun and salt have transformed into a pungent, amber liquid. It sounds, perhaps, a little challenging to a modern ear, but imagine it not as something overpowering, but as a deep, savory note. A kind of ancient umami that heightens the flavor of everything it touches, much like a very fine, aged anchovy essence. It is the salt of the sea, concentrated and mellowed, and it makes the grilled fish and the simple boiled greens taste more intensely of themselves. As the savory courses wind down, and the wine begins to flow more freely, the mood shifts towards something sweeter. And here you discover that the Greek sweet tooth is as refined as it is natural, because their sweetener is honey. Not the bland, processed sugar of later centuries, but golden, aromatic thyme honey, or the dark, almost species from the slopes of Mount Hymettus. For dessert, you might nibble on a bar made of sesame seeds and honey, pressed together into a sticky, nutty, intensely satisfying crunch. It is the kind of sweet that feels like pure energy, a gift from the bees and the earth. Or perhaps a slice of soft, fresh cheesecake is placed before you. Nothing like the dense, refrigerated blocks we know, but a delicate, almost mousse-like creation of fresh, drained cheese, sweetened with that same fragrant honey, and maybe topped with a few crushed walnuts. There are pastries too. Thin layers of dough soaked in honey syrup until they become translucent and dripping with sweetness. You eat it with your fingers, licking the sticky gold from your skin, and the taste is so pure, so uncomplicated, that it feels like a kind of nourishment for the soul, as much as the body. And then, as the last of the honey sesame crumbs are brushed away, the dinner transforms into something else entirely. The tables are cleared and the room becomes a symposium. This is not merely a drinking party. It is the great, glowing hearth of Greek social and intellectual life. A large, wide-mouthed bowl called a crater is brought in and placed in the center of the room. Into it, a servant pours wine, dark as a winter sea, and then, with great ceremony, water from a cooled clay jug. The mixing of wine and water is a sacred and utterly civilized act. To drink wine neat was considered barbaric, a sure path to madness and ruin. So, at the beginning of the evening, the group elects a king of the banquet, a sort of playful master of ceremonies, whose first and most important duty is to decree the ratio of water to wine. It might be 3 parts water to 1 of wine for a long philosophical night, or 2 to 1 for a more relaxed, poetic evening. The goal, you see, is not intoxication, but a kind of sustained, pleasant tipsiness, a warm, golden glow that loosens the tongue and sharpens the wit without ever dulling the mind. It is, in its way, a very happy, very ancient happy hour, designed to keep the conversation sparkling until the stars begin to fade. You recline once more on your couch, a garland of flowers or ivy perhaps placed on your head to cool your brow, and the evening unfolds in a fabric of sound and thought. A young man with a lyre, its tortoiseshell body polished to a warm sheen, strums a soft, meandering melody, and someone begins to recite a passage from Homer, the ancient words rolling through the lamplit room like the sound of the sea. The conversation ebbs and flows: politics, the nature of the gods, the latest play from the theatre, the true meaning of love. And then, someone calls for a game. The most famous of these is kottabos, a wonderfully silly and skillful pastime. You take your shallow wine cup, the kylix, and with a practiced flick of your wrist, you fling the last few drops of wine, the dregs, at a target set up in the middle of the room. It might be a small bronze disc balanced on a stand, and the goal is to knock it down with a clean, arcing splash. The room erupts in good-natured cheers and groans as the wine flies, leaving small, dark stains on the wall. And the king of the banquet might award a prize. A honey cake, perhaps, or a kiss from a favored companion, to the victor. It is absurd, it is messy, and it is utterly delightful, a reminder that even the most elevated minds need to play. And it is here, in this atmosphere of wit and warmth, that you might encounter a figure like Aspasia. She is a hetera, a term that is often poorly translated, but which means, in its truest sense, a companion. Aspasia is not a silent, veiled presence. She is a woman of striking intelligence and grace, originally from Miletus, who has become the beloved partner of the great statesman Pericles. In a symposium, her presence is a mark of the highest intellectual caliber. She reclines on a couch, her himation draped in soft, elegant folds, and she engages in the philosophical debate with a clarity and insight that commands the respect of every man in the room. Socrates himself is said to have sought her counsel. Imagine her voice, calm and measured, offering a gentle but devastatingly precise counterpoint to a blustering argument about justice, or reciting a fragment of her own poetry. She is not a performer in the sense of providing mere entertainment. She is a full participant in the life of the mind, and her laughter, when it comes, is warm and genuine. The symposium, in her presence, becomes something more than a drinking party. It becomes a true meeting of souls, a place where the boundaries of the everyday world seem to soften and expand. The hours slip by, unnoticed. The oil lamps burn low, their flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. The lyre falls silent, and the conversation deepens into a quieter, more intimate murmur. Outside, the city has long since gone to sleep, and the only sounds are the distant, rhythmic chirping of crickets and the occasional mournful hoot of an owl. You rise finally, your limbs heavy with a pleasant weariness, your mind still humming with poetry and ideas. The host presses a final cup of watered wine into your hand for the walk home, a gesture of pure, liquid hospitality. As you step out into the cool pre-dawn air, the streets are empty and silvered with moonlight. The scent of jasmine hangs in the air, and from somewhere you hear the soft, distant strum of a lyre. Perhaps another symposium, still lingering in its final, gentle moments. You make your way back through the quiet city, past the sleeping houses with their white walls glowing faintly in the dark, and when you finally reach your own courtyard and your simple, wool-stuffed bed, you lie down and close your eyes. The last thing you feel is not the rush of a day overfilled, but the deep, soul-deep contentment of having been fed. Not just with food and wine, but with beauty, with friendship, and with the quiet, unhurried pleasure of simply being alive. And as sleep comes, it carries with it the faint, sweet taste of honey and the echo of laughter, a gentle, human soundtrack to carry you into rest. And now, as the first, pale light of dawn begins to seep over the rooftops, soft as the bloom on a grape, you stir. Not with a jolt, not to the clang of an alarm, but to the slow, gradual warming of the air and the first tentative chirps of sparrows in the courtyard. You are still wrapped in that deep, honeyed contentment from the night before, a feeling that has settled into your very bones. The wool-stuffed mattress cradles you, and for a long, delicious moment, you simply lie there, watching the light change from silver to a soft, buttery gold on the whitewashed wall. There is no rush. The day ahead is not a series of tasks to be conquered, but a gentle rhythm to be followed, a rhythm that begins, as all good days do, with the care of the body. Imagine yourself finally rising, your bare feet meeting the cool, smooth plaster of the floor. The air is already warm, carrying the faint, dry scent of the earth from the courtyard. Today, like most days, getting dressed is an act of simple, flowing grace. You reach not for a complicated garment with buttons and stiff seams, but for your chiton. Picture it, a simple, beautiful rectangle of soft, undyed linen, the color of fresh cream or the pale sand on a sheltered beach. The fabric is lightweight, woven loosely enough to let the air circulate freely. You take this single piece of cloth, and with a few deft, practiced movements, you fold it around your body. The art is in the drape, not the cut. You pin it at your shoulders with small, delicate brooches, perhaps of bone or bronze, and tie a simple girdle at your waist. As you let the fabric fall, it settles into a cascade of effortless, vertical folds, like the fluting on a temple column. You can feel the breeze, a soft, warm zephyr, pass right through the linen, whispering across the skin of your arms and legs. There are no tight seams digging into your sides, no constricting collars. It is a garment designed for a climate and a life lived largely outdoors, a second skin that offers shade and modesty, while still letting you feel intimately connected to the air around you. You are, in a very real sense, wearing the breeze. Now for your feet. You have a choice, a small daily luxury. For a day that might involve strolling through the agora or walking a dusty path to a friend's farm, you might slip on a pair of sandals. These are not the clunky, heavy things we might think of. They are crafted from soft, supple leather, often dyed a rich tan or left in its natural state, with a lattice of intricate straps that crisscross over your foot and wind around your ankle. The leather is worn smooth and warm from use, and it hugs your foot with a familiar, gentle pressure. But perhaps today, you choose the even simpler pleasure of going barefoot. You step out of your room and into the courtyard, and the first thing you feel is the sun-warmed stone beneath your soles. It's a grounding sensation, a direct, tactile conversation with the earth. The stones are smooth from years of footsteps, and they hold the heat of the sun in a way that feels like a quiet, solid reassurance. You can feel the subtle difference in texture as you walk from the flagstones onto a patch of beaten earth, a fine, soft dust that puffs up between your toes. This connection, this feeling of the ground beneath you, is a constant, gentle reminder of the physical world, a pleasure so simple it's almost entirely forgotten in a world of rubber soles. With your body draped and your feet grounded, the next ritual awaits, one that engages the most evocative of the senses: smell. In a corner of your room sits a small, painted chest, and inside, nestled like jewels, are a collection of alabastra. These are small, elegant vials, carved from a translucent, honey-veined stone called alabaster, their shapes ranging from simple flasks to tiny, sculpted amphorae. You pick one up. It is cool and impossibly smooth in your palm. Inside is not just oil, but a story, a memory, a mood captured in liquid. The base is always olive oil, the lifeblood of this world, but it has been transformed. For weeks, fragrant roots, flowers, and spices have been steeped in the golden oil, absorbing their essence. You might choose one scented with the deep, heady sweetness of rose, a fragrance that speaks of sun-drenched gardens and Aphrodite's own bower. Or perhaps you prefer the cool, powdery elegance of iris, a scent as refined as a philosophical thought. There is oil perfumed with spicy cinnamon, a precious import that whispers of distant, exotic lands, and oil infused with the clean, almost green fragrance of lily. You pour a small pool of the warm, rose-scented oil into your palm, and as you rub your hands together, the fragrance blooms in the air around you. You anoint your arms, your legs, your chest, working the oil into your skin with slow, circular motions. It is a massage you give yourself, a moment of quiet, self-directed care. The oil sinks in, leaving your skin not greasy, but supple and glowing with a healthy sheen. And the scent, that beautiful, layered rose, will stay with you all day. A subtle, personal aura that drifts around you with every movement, a quiet pleasure for yourself, and a gentle gift to anyone who comes near. On a day when you feel like adorning yourself a little further, you might open another small box. Inside, resting on a bed of raw linen, is a piece of jewelry that seems to capture the very light of the morning. It is a wreath, but not of real leaves that would wilt and fade. This one is made of impossibly thin, hammered gold, each delicate laurel leaf trembling on a tiny, invisible wire. To wear it is to feel a little like a god, or a poet being crowned at a festival. The leaves catch the light with every turn of your head, shimmering like a constellation of tiny stars nestled in your hair. And there, coiled in the corner, is a bracelet in the form of a snake, its scales meticulously etched, its head curving around to clasp its own tail in an eternal loop. It is a symbol of protection and rebirth. But more than that, it is simply a beautiful, sinuous line of gold that feels cool and heavy and precious against the warmth of your wrist. These are not vulgar displays of wealth, but intimate, personal treasures, worn close to the skin and appreciated for their exquisite craftsmanship. But the ultimate daily ritual of bodily care, the one that truly sets this world apart, takes place not in the privacy of the home, but in a vibrant public hub, the gymnasium. As the morning sun climbs higher and the day grows warm, you make your way through the city to this dedicated space. The word itself comes from gymnos, meaning naked, and it was a place where men exercised unclothed, a practice that celebrated the human form without shame. The air greets you before the sight does. A complex bouquet of warm dust, fresh sweat, and the pervasive green-gold scent of olive oil. The gymnasium is a large open-air complex, with shaded colonnades for running and wrestling, and sunny courtyards for discus and javelin. You join a group of friends, and the afternoon is spent in joyful, vigorous exertion. You feel your muscles warm and lengthen, your heart pump, your skin grow slick, with a mixture of oil and honest sweat. This is not a chore, not a punishment for last night's feast, but a celebration of what your body can do, a pursuit of the ideal that a sound mind dwells in a sound body. And then comes the most singular, and perhaps the most satisfying, part of the entire routine. After your exercise, your skin is coated in a fine layer of grime, dust, sweat, and the now spent olive oil. You pick up your strigil. Picture a curved, blunt blade of bronze or iron, shaped a little like a folded leaf, with a smooth handle. It is a tool of pure, simple genius. You begin to scrape it gently but firmly across your skin, and it lifts away the oily, dirty mixture in a clean, satisfying sweep. It is a sensation unlike any other, a deep, almost purring cleanliness that exfoliates the skin and leaves it tingling and perfectly smooth. The rhythmic scrape, scrape, scrape of strigils is the soundtrack of the gymnasium, a gentle, meditative chorus. Friends help each other with the hard-to-reach spots on their backs, the act a casual, comfortable intimacy. The used oil, now a greyish paste, is collected in a small vial. Believe it or not, this gloios, as it was called, was believed to have medicinal properties and was sometimes even sold. Nothing was wasted. And then, the final, breathtaking act. Still glowing from the scrape, you walk to the edge of a large tiled pool, filled with water so cold it makes your teeth ache just to look at it. Without hesitation, you plunge in. The shock is total and immediate, a gasp of pure, electric sensation that washes away every last trace of fatigue and heat. It is a reset button for the body and mind. You emerge moments later, your skin pink and singing, every nerve awake. You wrap yourself in a simple linen cloth and join your friends on a bench in the shade of the colonnade. The air is cool on your damp skin, and the scent of fresh oil, ready for a new application, mingles with the green smell of the nearby plane trees. And it is here, in this state of supreme physical well-being, that the conversation turns, as it so often does, to philosophy. The nature of the good life, the shape of the ideal city, the music of the spheres. These are the topics that flow as easily as the water from the fountain, debated with passion and wit by men whose bodies are as exercised as their minds. Later, as the sun begins its slow descent and the heat of the day softens, you might decide to walk to the market. The light is a thick, golden syrup, and the shadows are long and blue. A servant accompanies you, carrying a skierdion. This is a clever, folding sunshade. A canopy of brightly coloured fabric stretched over a delicate wooden frame. It opens with a soft whoosh like a bird unfurling its wing, and creates a portable patch of deep, cool shade just for you. You walk beneath it, protected from the last insistent rays of the sun, the world framed by the vibrant border of the fabric. The feel of the warm stone under your sandals, the scent of your rose oil still lingering, the sound of the city settling into evening. It is a moment of perfect, peaceful transition. And as you walk, you realize that this entire day, from the first drape of the linen to the last cool step in the shade, has been a quiet symphony of sensory pleasures. The care of the body was not a vanity, but a form of respect, a way of being fully present in the world. The soft linen, the warm leather, the fragrant oil, the invigorating scrape of the strigil. These were not luxuries reserved for the few, but the simple, daily textures of a life lived in harmony with the body and the senses. It was a life that understood that feeling the breeze on your skin, the earth under your feet, and the lingering scent of roses in the air was not just pleasant, but a fundamental part of what it meant to be beautifully, peacefully, and fully human. And as the evening star appears, a single, steady point of light in the fading blue, you carry that feeling with you, a quiet, scented, and deeply physical contentment that is ready to settle, once again, into a night of restful, dreamless sleep. And so, from that feeling of quiet, physical contentment, we arrive at something the Greeks held even dearer than the feeling of oil on skin or the scent of roses in the air. They had a word for it, a beautiful word, shole. Now, you might hear an echo of our word school in that, and you'd be right, but the meaning has drifted over the centuries like a slow, lazy cloud. For us, school is often about preparation, about productivity, about getting ready for something else. For the Greeks, shole was the destination itself. It was leisure, yes, but not the kind of empty, restless leisure we sometimes know. The scrolling, the channel flipping, the feeling of needing to be entertained. No, schole was the highest good, the very point of life. It was time for contemplation, for art, for civic life, for simply being. Your ideal day wasn't measured in tasks completed or coins earned, but in the depth of a conversation, under the dappled shade of a plane tree, the shared catharsis of a play, the honorable sweat of the gymnasium. Leisure was the rich, fertile soil in which a good life grew, and they cultivated it with the same care a gardener gives to a beloved vine. Imagine, then, one of the great communal gatherings of that leisurely life, a day at the theatre. But this wasn't a quick 2-hour diversion in a dark, hushed room. Picture yourself rising with the dawn, the air still cool and tasting of the sea. You're not just going to watch a performance. You're going to a festival, a sacred and civic ritual in honor of Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy and transformation. You pack a simple lunch, some flatbread, a few olives, a small round of cheese, a skin of watered wine, and you pull a thick, woolly cloak from its peg on the wall. You'll need it, even on a sunny day, because you'll be sitting for hours on a stone seat, and the stone has a way of holding the night's chill. You make your way to the Theatre of Dionysus, built into the southern slope of the Acropolis. It's a vast, open bowl that can hold roughly 17,000 people, and the sound of that many souls gathering is a low, thrumming hum, like a hive of bees waking in the spring. You find your place, perhaps on a cushion you've brought from home, and you settle in. The stage is a circle of packed earth far below, and beyond it the view opens up to the whole sweep of the Attic countryside, the hills rolling away in soft sun-baked folds. The performance is not a single play, but a trilogy of tragedies, followed by a rowdy, often bawdy, satyr play to lift the spirits. It will last all day, from morning until the sun begins to dip behind the hills. The actors are not the naturalistic performers we might imagine. They are larger-than-life figures, made even more so by their costumes. High-platformed boots, padded robes, and most strikingly, elaborate masks of painted linen or wood. These masks are not just for show, they are ingenious instruments. The open mouth of the mask acts like a small megaphone, amplifying the actor's voice, so that a whispered secret or a howl of grief can reach the very back row, clear as a bell. You watch, and you listen, and you are not a passive spectator. The chorus chants and dances, and you feel the rhythm in your own chest. The stories of Agamemnon, or Oedipus, or Medea unfold, and the whole audience around you gasps, weeps, and laughs as one body. It is a shared dream, a collective meditation on fate and justice and human frailty, all under the wide, watching sky. And when the festival of Dionysus was over, the Athenian year offered other sacred games, other expressions of shole that honored the body as much as the soul. The most famous, of course, were the Olympic Games, held every 4 years in the sanctuary of Olympia. Now picture the scene not as a modern stadium of corporate logos and jumbotrons, but as a sacred grove, a temenos thick with the scent of pine and wild olive, the air shimmering with heat and the murmur of a vast, temporary city of tents and pilgrims. The games were, at their heart, a religious festival for Zeus. And one of the most striking things you would notice, something that always catches the modern imagination off guard, is that the athletes competed entirely naked. Their bodies, oiled with olive oil, and then dusted with fine sand, glistened in the sun. It was not a display of vanity, but a kind of offering, a celebration of the human form as the pinnacle of creation, a body honed and disciplined and presented to the god. You'd watch a sprinter, his skin a gleaming, sun-burnished bronze, Crouch at the starting line, a simple groove in the stone. The signal is given, and he explodes forward, a study in contained power, his feet pounding the hard-packed earth of the stadium. The crowd, a press of bodies from every corner of the Greek world, roars, and the air is thick with the smell of sweat, dust, and the crushed wild celery that will be woven into the victor's crown. The prize is not gold, but a simple wreath, and a glory that will follow a man home to his city-state, like a personal sunbeam. But this world of athletic glory was not solely the province of men. In that same sacred grove at Olympia, there was another festival, quieter, but no less profound. The Heria, the games in honor of Hera, the queen of the gods. Here, young women, unmarried girls, had their own foot races. They did not run naked, but in a short tunic that fell just above the knee, their right shoulder and breast bared, a style that echoed the garb of a warrior. Imagine the sight. A line of young women, their hair tied back or flying loose, poised at the starting line of the very same stadium where the men competed. The signal comes, and they are off, a blur of motion and flying fabric, their bare feet slapping the earth. The winner received an olive wreath, just like the men, and a share of a sacrificial cow, a portion of the meat offered to Hera herself. It was a rare and precious moment of female glory in a world largely defined by men, a sanctioned space where their strength and speed and striving could be seen and celebrated and woven into the sacred fabric of the festival. You can almost hear the higher, brighter pitch of the cheering, the proud shouts of their families, a sound that rose into the same sky that watched over the wrestlers and the charioteers. And when the games were over, and you returned home, the texture of Scholler softened into something even more intimate. It was found in the quiet companionship of a creature who asked nothing of you but your presence. The Greeks loved their pets with a tenderness that feels startlingly modern. Dogs were common, not just as working animals for hunting or herding, but as beloved members of the household. You might have a small, fluffy dog, a Maltese perhaps, with a coat the color of fresh cream, curled at your feet as you sat in the courtyard in the late afternoon. Its warmth would be a small, steady presence against your ankle. And when that small life, so much shorter than our own, came to its end, the grief was real and acknowledged. We know this because epitaphs for beloved dogs have been found, carved into stone with the same care as a human memorial. One, for a dog named Partridge, speaks of its playful spirit and the sorrow of its passing. Imagine tracing those letters with your finger. The cool stone, a small monument to a warm, wriggling body that had brought so much simple joy. They were mourned like family, these small, silent companions, their memory given the dignity of permanence. A name and a sentiment surviving across millennia to tell us that a scratched ear and a wagging tail were as treasured then as they are now. And of course, the life of Scully was not always so grand as a theatre festival, or so poignant as a pet's epitaph. Often, it was found in the simplest of pleasures, the kind that fit in the palm of your hand. If you were a child in ancient Greece, your toy box, perhaps a simple clay pot, held treasures of timeless appeal. You might have a painted terracotta doll with articulated limbs, its little dress bright with mineral pigments, its face a serene, knowing smile. You might have a wooden yo-yo, a disc that spun and danced on its string, its motion as hypnotic then as it is now. And you would almost certainly have a set of knucklebones, astragaloi, taken from the ankle of a sheep or a goat. These small, irregularly shaped bones were the dice and jacks of the ancient world. You could toss them, catching them on the back of your hand, or play a game of skill and chance, the bones clicking together with a satisfying, earthy sound. These were not complex, battery-powered things, but objects of pure, simple fun, their magic lying in the dexterity of your own fingers, and the rules of a game passed down through generations. The joy of sending a yo-yo spinning into the air, the focused concentration of lining up a shot with a knucklebone. These are quiet, universal rhythms of childhood that needed no translation. For the adults, a similar quiet focus could be found bent over a board game. One of the most popular was Petea, a game of strategy that resembled a simpler form of chess. You could while away a warm afternoon in a shady portico, the stone floor cool beneath you, moving smooth pebbles, or small polished stones across a board etched with lines et. The click of the stones, the low murmur of conversation, the occasional soft laugh of triumph or groan of defeat. These were the sounds of a mind at play, a mind engaged not in the struggle for survival, but in the pure, abstract challenge of outthinking an opponent. Bets might be placed, a few obols changing hands, but the true currency was the time itself. The easy companionship of a game played with no purpose other than the playing. It was a small, perfect model of skole, a moment carved out of the day, dedicated to the quiet exercise of the intellect and the simple pleasure of a friend's company. And yet, even in this world that so valued leisure, work was a constant, a rhythm that underpinned the day. But the Greeks had a way of weaving even their labor with a thread of song, so that the two were not separate but intertwined. Work was never silent. The rhythm of the loom, the shuttle flying back and forth, was accompanied by a humming tune, a weaving song, whose melody rose and fell with the pattern being created. The slow, grinding push of the millstone, turning grain into flour, had its own chant, a low, repetitive sound that made the work feel lighter, the body moving in a kind of trance. Out in the olive groves, during the harvest, a call and response song would ring out, the workers beating the branches and gathering the fruit in a shared, musical rhythm. Even the shepherds on the hillsides had songs to call their flocks, high, lilting melodies that carried on the wind. This was not a forced cheerfulness, but a natural human instinct to find a pulse in the work, to let the breath and the voice and the body move together. It turned a task into something almost like a dance, a quiet, communal hum that said, "We are here, we are working, and we are alive." And so, as the shadows lengthen and the warmth of the day begins to soften into the cool of evening, you can picture the many textures of this leisurely life. The collective gasp of 17,000 people in a theatre, the glistening, sand-dusted body of a sprinter, the flying hair of a young woman racing for a wreath of olive, the warm, trusting weight of a small dog at your feet, the satisfying click of a knucklebone, the quiet strategy of a board game played in the shade. And underneath it all, the gentle, ever-present hum of a work song, a melody that turned the necessary into something almost beautiful. It was a life that understood, with a clarity we sometimes lose, that the point of it all was not to do more, but to be more fully, to feel more deeply, to connect more completely, with the gods, with the city, with each other, and with the simple, quiet joy of a moment well spent. And as the first star appears, a single, steady point of light in the fading blue, you can carry that feeling with you, a quiet, contented hum, ready to settle, once again, into a night of restful, dreamless sleep. Now, imagine you're stepping through your own front door, the wood warm from the late afternoon sun, and into the quiet, familiar dimness of your home. The first thing you notice, as you always do, is the small, steady flame flickering in the center of the main room. It sits on a simple clay altar, a raised hearth dedicated to Hestia, the goddess of the home and the family. This fire is never, ever allowed to go out. It's the warm, beating heart of the household, a constant, gentle presence that smells faintly of burning olive oil and the ghost of last night's meal. When a new baby is born, it's carried around this hearth in a ritual that welcomes it into the family. When a daughter marries and leaves for her new home, a flame from her mother's hearth is carried in a lantern to light the first fire in her own new life. You can kneel here anytime you feel a little lost or grateful, or just in need of a quiet moment, and pour a small libation of wine or oil onto the embers. It hisses softly, a tiny, fragrant puff of steam, and you feel, in that simple act, a connection to something steady and safe. The gods here are not just distant figures in marble temples. They are roommates, sharing the warmth of your fire, the smell of your bread, the quiet rhythm of your days. And this intimacy with the divine extends, in a surprisingly cozy way, even to the art of healing. If you were to fall ill, or if an old ache simply wouldn't leave you, you might decide to visit a sanctuary of Asclepius, the god of medicine. Picture this not as a cold, sterile place of sharp instruments and bitter potions, but as a peaceful, terraced complex nestled in a hillside, shaded by cypress trees, with a sacred spring bubbling nearby. You'd spend a day purifying yourself, bathing in cool, clear water, and making small offerings of honey cakes. As evening falls, You'd join other hopeful pilgrims in a long, dimly lit dormitory called the Abaton. The air is cool and still, smelling of beeswax and dried herbs. You'd find a spot on a soft sheepskin laid upon the stone floor, the wool thick and comforting beneath you. All around, the only sound is the quiet rustle of others settling in, the occasional sigh, and the gentle, rhythmic hissing of the sacred, non-venomous snakes that live in the sanctuary, gliding silently among the sleepers. You close your eyes, hoping for a dream, not just any dream, but a visit from the god himself, perhaps as a bearded man with a kind face, or as a serpent that coils gently beside you and licks your wound with a cool, healing tongue. This was dream therapy, a mystical, deeply personal form of healthcare, where the cure came not from a knife or a pill, but from a whispered word in the quiet of the night. A divine prescription delivered in your sleep. You'd wake in the morning, the dream vivid in your mind, and share it with a priest, who would help you interpret the god's advice. It might be a change in diet, a specific exercise, or simply the profound, healing power of having been, for one night, in the direct, comforting presence of the divine. Of course, not every path to wisdom was so still and silent. The Greek love for a life well examined could also be loud, messy, and wonderfully, startlingly direct. If you were to wander through the bustling agora, the marketplace of Athens, you might stumble upon a sight that would make you stop and stare. There, rolling along the dusty ground, is a very large terracotta storage jar, a pithos, and living inside it is a man. This is Diogenes, a philosopher who believed that true happiness required almost nothing. He is famously grumpy, often barefoot, and dressed in a single, rough cloak. He owns the jar, a wooden bowl, and that's about it. You might see him carrying a lit lantern in broad daylight, and when you ask him what he's doing, he'll squint at you and say, "I'm looking for an honest man." He lives his philosophy with a radical, almost comical, commitment. The story goes, Alexander the Great himself, the most powerful man in the known world, came to see this famous character. Alexander stood before the jar, casting a long shadow over Diogenes, and said, "I am Alexander, the great king. Ask of me anything you desire, and I will give it to you." Diogenes, squinting up at the young conqueror, simply replied, "Stand a little out of my sun." He needed nothing more than warmth and light. He was proving, in his own pungent, theatrical way, that a life stripped down to its bare essentials could be a life of perfect freedom. He wasn't a sad ascetic. He was a man who had found a strange, fierce joy in owning nothing, a living, breathing, occasionally barking, reminder that the good life might be much simpler than we think. But if the jar life of Diogenes feels a little too Spartan, you might find your spiritual home in a different kind of philosophical community, one that smelled of fresh herbs and laughter. Just outside the city walls of Athens, a man named Epicurus bought a house with a large garden. He invited his friends to live with him there, not as students in a formal school, but as a community of equals. Men and women, free citizens and even slaves, all lived and learned together in this peaceful green sanctuary. The goal, Epicurus taught, was pleasure, but he meant something very specific by it: the absence of pain in the body and trouble in the soul. The greatest pleasures, he believed, were not wild feasts or riches, but the simple, sustainable joys of friendship, thoughtful conversation, and a meal of fresh vegetables, bread, and water. You could walk through the garden, past the neat rows of beans and lettuces, and find a small group sitting under an olive tree, talking quietly about the nature of atoms or the path to a tranquil mind. There was no grand dining hall, no rigid hierarchy. The fear of death, Epicurus reasoned, was the greatest source of human anxiety, and he offered a gentle, comforting antidote. The soul is made of atoms, and when we die, those atoms simply scatter. We no longer exist to feel pain or fear. It is a state of perfect, dreamless peace. In the garden, you could learn to let go of that fear, to find a deep, quiet contentment in the present moment, surrounded by friends who felt more like family. It was a philosophy of coziness, a radical embrace of the simple, shared life. And then, of course, there was Socrates. You couldn't walk through Athens without eventually seeing him. He was famously, almost shockingly ugly, with a snub nose, bulging eyes, and a pot belly. He walked barefoot, even in winter, and wore the same simple cloak year-round. He looked, people joked, like a satyr, one of those half-man, half-goat creatures of the wild. But the moment he opened his mouth, everything changed. He would stop a well-dressed politician or a confident general in the street, and, with a twinkle in his eye, ask a simple question. "What is courage?" he might ask. The man would give a proud answer, and Socrates, with gentle, relentless logic, would ask another question, and then another, peeling back the layers of assumption until the man was left, not humiliated, but genuinely, profoundly puzzled. He called himself a midwife of ideas, helping others give birth to their own understanding. He charmed the young men of Athens, not with flattery, but by making them feel, for the first time, truly interesting. And when he was put on trial for corrupting the youth and impiety, he faced his death with the same calm, ironic humor. His last words, as the hemlock poison numbed his legs and crept toward his heart, were not a grand pronouncement, but a small, domestic reminder to a friend. "Crito, we owe a rooster to Asclepius. Please, don't forget to pay the debt." It was a final, cozy bit of everyday business, a thank offering to the god of healing for a life well lived before the long, quiet sleep. Meanwhile, in another corner of the philosophical world, Aristotle was taking a different approach. He had been Plato's most brilliant student, but where Plato's thoughts soared into the abstract heavens, Aristotle's feet were planted firmly on the ground. He was fascinated by everything he could see, touch, and dissect. He founded his own school, the Lyceum. He was a peripatetic philosopher, which means he taught while walking. Imagine a morning at the Lyceum, the air cool and fresh. You'd join a group of students strolling along the shaded, tree-lined paths, and Aristotle would walk among you, his hands clasped behind his back, talking about the life cycle of a starfish, the best form of government, the logic of a syllogism, or the proper way to feel pity at a tragedy. The gentle rhythm of the walk, the dappled sunlight, the constant movement, it all seemed to mirror the active, inquiring nature of his mind. For Aristotle, the good life, eudaimonia, wasn't a static state of contentment. It was an activity. It was the flourishing of a human being doing what a human being does best, using reason, cultivating virtue, and engaging fully with the world. To walk and to think, to move and to understand were one and the same. But perhaps the most peculiar philosophical scene of all belonged to Pythagoras, a name you might remember from geometry class. He was more than a mathematician. He was a kind of mystical guru who founded a secretive commune in southern Italy. The rules were strict and strange. All property was shared. You couldn't eat beans, for reasons that remain a little mysterious. And the master himself delivered his lectures from behind a curtain. You'd sit in a hushed room with other followers, the air thick with incense and anticipation. And you'd hear his voice, deep and authoritative, explaining that the entire universe was made of numbers, that the music of the spheres created a celestial harmony we couldn't hear, and that the soul was immortal and would be reborn. You never saw his face. The voice from behind the veil was enough. It created an aura of profound mystery, a sense that the truths he was revealing were too powerful for direct sight. It was a life of pure, abstract devotion, a world away from the bustling agora or the sunny garden, a quiet, bean-free, curtained-off search for cosmic order. And for all this vibrant intellectual life, the deepest, most profound spiritual experience for an ancient Greek might have been a secret one. Once in your life, you could make a pilgrimage to the town of Eleusis for the Eleusinian mysteries, a ritual so sacred that to reveal its secrets was a crime punishable by death. We still don't know exactly what happened inside, but we know the feeling of it. You'd walk the 14 miles from Athens to Eleusis in a great, joyous procession, carrying torches and singing hymns. You'd fast, and then, in the cool, dark, cavernous hall called the Telesterion, you'd drink a special potion called kykion, a mixture of barley, water, and mint. What happened next was a revelation. In the flickering torchlight, something was shown, something was done, and a profound, unshakable certainty settled in your heart. The fear of death, that cold, grasping dread, simply melted away. You were initiated into a mystery that promised not just survival, but a happy, blessed existence in the afterlife. You'd emerge from that dark hall into the starlit night a different person, carrying a quiet, radiant secret that made the world feel, forever after, a little more luminous, a little more safe. Even the gods you knew best could speak in riddles. If you had a burning question, a dilemma too great for human counsel, you might travel to Delphi, the navel of the world, to consult the oracle of Apollo. The air there smelled of laurel leaves and the sweet, cold water of the Castalian spring. You'd offer a cake and a goat, and if the omens were right, you'd be led into the temple's inner sanctum. There, seated on a tripod over a chasm in the earth, was the Pythia, a priestess in a state of trance. You'd ask your question in a trembling whisper, and she would answer, her voice perhaps altered by the vapors rising from the ground in a torrent of words that the priests would shape into a hexameter verse. The answer was always a riddle, a puzzle you had to solve for yourself. When King Croesus asked if he should attack Persia, the oracle replied that he would destroy a great empire. He did, of course, his own. The wisdom of the gods was not a simple command. It was a mirror, forcing you to look deeper into your own soul. All of these threads, the cozy hearth, the healing dream, the jar in the marketplace, the quiet garden, the walking thinker, the voice behind the curtain, the secret ritual, the cryptic riddle, they all weave together into a single, beautiful fabric. The Greeks had a word for the goal of all this living and thinking: eudaimonia. We often translate it as happiness, but it's so much more than a passing mood. It's a deep, enduring state of human flourishing. It's the feeling of a life fully and well lived, where your potential is realized, your relationships are rich, and your days have meaning. It wasn't found in the accumulation of things, but in the quality of your thoughts, the depth of your connections, and the quiet, daily rituals that made a house a home and a life a blessing. As the embers of your own hearth settle and glow a soft, deep orange, you can feel the shape of that ancient idea, a warm and steady presence, a quiet hum of contentment that asks nothing more of you than to be present, to be thoughtful, and to rest deeply and peacefully in the simple fact of being alive. And so, from the quiet private glow of the hearth, from that deep and personal sense of flourishing, we can now step out of your own front door and into the wider embrace of the city. Because a life well lived in ancient Greece was not lived in isolation. It was lived in the vibrant, sometimes wonderfully odd, collective hum of the civic hive. Imagine, if you will, leaving the cool shade of your courtyard and walking down a narrow, winding street, the packed earth warm under your sandals, the whitewashed walls on either side guiding you like a gentle river channel. Until suddenly, the path opens up. You have arrived at the agora. It is not just a marketplace, though it is certainly that. It is the beating, breathing heart of the city. The air is a rich, swirling collage of sensations. You'd wander past stalls piled high with purple figs, their skins just beginning to split with sweetness, a few lazy bees circling in the morning warmth. A vendor of herbs has bundles of dried oregano and thyme tied with rough twine, their scent rising like a memory of sun-baked hillsides. Nearby, a fishmonger sloshes water over his catch, silver anchovies and ruby mullet glinting on a marble slab, while a few feet away, a potter has arranged his wares. Sturdy amphorae for wine, delicate drinking cups painted with scenes of racing athletes. You can hear a philosopher, his voice a steady, droning murmur, arguing a fine point of ethics with a small cluster of students under the shade of a painted colonnade. The smell of roasting chestnuts drifts from a brazier, a nutty, slightly charred perfume that mixes with the dust, the sweat, the perfume of passing citizens. It is a feast for all the senses, a daily spectacle of abundance and life that asks nothing of you but to be present. And in the center of this beautiful chaos, you'd find one of the city's quiet marvels, a public fountain house. Water, that most essential gift, was not a private luxury but a public joy. Imagine a long, low building with a colonnade, and set into its wall a row of bronze lion heads, their mouths open. You'd fill your hydria, a three-handled water jar, at the fountain house, the cool, clear water gushing from a lion's mouth, with a sound like liquid crystal. This water came straight from mountain springs, channeled through clay pipes for miles, and it was free for everyone. The act of fetching water was a daily ritual of gossip and refreshment. You'd stand in line with your neighbors, the cool spray a welcome relief on a hot day, and you'd exchange the small news of the street. Who was ill, who was getting married, the price of barley. The bronze lion's head, with its verdigris patina, would watch you with patient, empty eyes, a silent guardian of the city's health and its social glue. Now this civic life had its own unique and sometimes startling customs. Let's wander for a moment to the edge of the agora, where a peculiar and very quiet ritual might be taking place. It was called ostracism, and it was a safety valve for the pressures of democracy. Once a year, the citizens would gather, and if they chose, they could vote to exile a single politician for 10 years. Not as a punishment for a crime, but as a precaution, a way of saying, your ambition is making the city a little too warm, a little too tense. You'd pick up a broken piece of pottery, an ostrakon, a shard of a shattered wine cup, or a discarded oil jar. Someone would hand you a stylus and you'd scratch him onto the rough clay, Themistocles. Aristides, a name that had become too loud, too powerful. You'd then drop it in a large urn. It was a quiet, democratic way to say, please leave. There were no speeches, no accusations, just the soft scratch of metal on clay, the gentle clink of shards piling up, and the collective, almost gentle, decision to send someone on a long, reflective vacation. It was a strange, peaceful pruning of the political tree, ensuring no single branch grew too heavy. Of course, not all disputes could be solved with a pottery shard. For the smaller frictions of daily life, there was a system of remarkable grace. Instead of rushing to a law court, you'd often find yourself in a quiet room with a wise, white-haired neighbor. The Greeks used a system of public arbitration, where citizens over 60 served as arbitrators. Imagine how you and your neighbor are in a disagreement over the boundary of a fig tree's shade, or a debt that's a little overdue. Instead of a lawsuit, you'd sit together, perhaps with a jug of wine between you, and an elder would listen. He'd hear both sides, not with the cold formality of a judge, but with the weary, knowing patience of someone who has seen a lifetime of human squabbles. He'd help you find a compromise, a middle path, smoothing the rough edges of the argument until it was as soft and worn as a pebble in a stream. It was justice as a chat over wine, a quiet, human-scaled way of mending the small tears in the social fabric before they could unravel. And speaking of, let's step into one of the most beautiful and gentle of all the city's festivals, a time when the usual hierarchies of life seemed to dissolve like honey in warm water. It was the Anthesteria, a 3-day spring festival celebrating the new wine and the fleeting beauty of flowers. Picture the city in early spring, the air still carrying a slight chill but full of the promise of warmth. On the first day, you'd open the great clay jars of wine from the previous autumn's harvest. The smell would be rich and yeasty, a deep, earthy perfume. You'd crown your children with wreaths of fresh flowers, violets, ivy, and rose petals, their laughter ringing out as they paraded through the streets. And then came the most remarkable part. During this festival, everyone drank together. The master of the house and the people he enslaved, the wealthy merchant and the potter, all would share the new wine in a tipsy, blossom-scented equality. The boundaries of status, so rigidly drawn for the rest of the year, were temporarily washed away in a gentle flood of wine and springtime. It was a collective acknowledgement that beneath all the roles we play, we are all just people, warmed by the same sun, a little giddy from the same wine, and equally subject to the quiet, renewing power of the earth. This deep-seated sense of connection extended even to the stranger at the door. The Greeks had a sacred tradition called xenia, hospitality to strangers, and it was woven into the very fabric of their beliefs. If a traveler knocked on your door, dusty and tired from the road, you wouldn't ask their name or their business. Not at first. You'd offer a bath to wash the journey from their limbs, a meal to fill their belly, and a soft bed for the night. Only after they were rested and fed would you ask who they were and where they were going. This wasn't just good manners, it was a quiet, hopeful act of faith. Because that stranger, that weary traveler with sandals worn thin, might just be a god in disguise. Zeus himself, the protector of guests, was said to walk the earth in mortal form, testing the kindness of men. So every knock on the door was a potential encounter with the divine, a chance to unknowingly offer a cup of wine to the king of the gods. It made the world a place of gentle, constant possibility. Now, let's travel a little further, across the sparkling Aegean, to an island so sacred that the very messiness of human life was kept at a distance. The island of Delos, a small rocky speck of land, was believed to be the birthplace of Apollo and Artemis. And because of this, it was kept in a state of pristine, eternal purity. No one was allowed to be born there, and no one was allowed to die there. Imagine a whole island held in a kind of beautiful, suspended animation. The sick and the heavily pregnant were quietly ferried away to a neighboring island, ensuring that the only sounds on Delos were hymns sung by choruses of young girls, the rustle of the sacred palm tree where Leto was said to have given birth, and the gentle lapping of the turquoise water against the marble quays. It was a sanctuary free from the cries of newborns and the laments of mourners, a place that existed outside the normal cycle of life, a quiet, sun-bleached stage for nothing but ritual and reverence. While Delos represented a kind of serene, otherworldly purity, another city-state, Sparta, was cultivating a very different, and to other Greeks, quite scandalous, kind of earthly life. The freedom of Spartan women was the stuff of whispered gossip and open-mouthed astonishment across the Greek world. While an Athenian woman of a good family might spend most of her life indoors, managing the household in the dim light of the women's quarters, a Spartan woman was a force of nature. She could own land in her own right, managing vast estates. She received a formal education, learning to read, write, and debate. And most shockingly of all, she exercised in public. Imagine the scene. You are a visitor from Athens, and you see a young Spartan woman jog past you in a short, practical tunic, her muscles toned and her skin glowing with health, perhaps pausing to discuss a point of politics with a passing elder. It was a sight that scandalized and fascinated in equal measure. The belief was that strong, educated women produced strong warriors, and so the city invested in its daughters in a way that seemed utterly radical. A quiet revolution of physical and intellectual strength playing out in the open air. This idea of a powerful, transformative bond also found its most romantic and doomed expression in the military. The Sacred Band of Thebes was an elite army unit, but it was built on a principle that was more poetry than tactics. It consisted of 150 pairs of male lovers. The theory was simple and beautiful. A man would fight more fiercely, more courageously, next to his beloved than he ever would next to a stranger. He would rather die than show cowardice in front of the person he loved most. Imagine a battalion where every soldier fought not just for his city, but for the specific, beating heart of the man beside him. Their bond was meant to make them invincible, a wall of intertwined loyalty. For a generation they were. It was a military experiment forged from the deepest human affection, a quiet, fierce tribute to the power of love on a battlefield, before it was finally, tragically, broken. And far from the clash of shields, on the island of Lesbos, a different kind of love and learning was being cultivated in a garden. The poet Sappho ran a school for young women, a place dedicated not to war, but to the arts of beauty, music, and poetry. You might sit in a garden with other young women, the air thick with the scent of roses and hyacinth, learning to play the lyre. Sappho's own lyrics, fragments of which have floated down to us like petals on a stream, are full of flowers and moonlight, of violet-scented hair and the evening star. She taught the crafting of verses about longing and grace, creating a community of women bound by art and affection. It was a space of quiet, intense feeling, a world away from the masculine bustle of the agora, a place where the soul's more delicate colors could be explored and celebrated. And finally, as you walk back through the city at dusk, the day's business done, you might notice a small subtle gesture from a passerby. A mother, perhaps, adjusting the little pouch hanging from her baby's neck, or a merchant touching a blue glass bead strung above his shop door. These were amulets against the evil eye, a quiet, almost unconscious form of protection. The belief was that envy, a neighbor's too ardent praise, a stranger's lingering glance at your healthy child or your beautiful new cloak, could carry a malevolent, withering power. The amulet, often a blue eye staring back unblinking, was a way of deflecting that silent ill will, of bouncing it back to its sender. It was a small, private piece of magic, a quiet acknowledgement that life's blessings were fragile and needed a little shielding from the unseen currents of human emotion. As the last light fades and the scent of jasmine fills the cooling air, you carry with you the feeling of a city that was not just a collection of buildings, but a living, breathing organism, full of strange customs, deep connections, and a constant, gentle hum of shared life. Now, let's leave the familiar hum of the old city-states behind and drift eastward across the sparkling Aegean to a world that feels both grander and somehow more intimate in its ingenuity. The age after Alexander, the Hellenistic world, stretched its long, elegant fingers from Greece all the way to the banks of the Nile and the mountains of what is now Turkey. It was a time when the human mind seemed to stretch itself too, reaching for a kind of mechanical magic, a way of harnessing the world's hidden forces with bronze gears and cleverly trapped air. You might think of the ancient world as a place of simple tools, of muscle and wood and stone. But picture yourself now in a marble workshop in Alexandria around the 2nd century before the Common Era. And you'd be proven wonderfully, quietly wrong. Imagine you're holding a small, unassuming box, no larger than a shoebox, its surface cool and patinated with the deep green of aged bronze. It feels dense, surprisingly heavy for its size. When you peer inside, through a modern reconstruction, you don't see a simple void, you see a universe, a delicate, intricate clockwork of at least 37 meshing bronze gears, their teeth as fine as eyelashes, arranged in layers of differential drives. This is the Antikythera mechanism, a name that sounds like a spell, and in a way it was. You could turn a small hand crank on its side, and with a soft, satisfying whir of interlocking metal, pointers on its front and back dials would begin to move. One dial tracked the phases of the moon, a tiny painted sphere rotating on its axis, half black, half silver, showing you exactly where the moon was waxing or waning in its journey across the sky. Another dial, a spiral groove like a fingerprint, predicted solar and lunar eclipses with astonishing precision, calculating the Saros cycle, an 18-year astronomical rhythm. You could hold in your hands a pocket universe, a device that compressed the vast, slow dance of the heavens into a space you could wrap your fingers around. The gentle clicking of its gears wasn't a harsh mechanical sound, it was a soft, rhythmic whisper, a lullaby of celestial mathematics. It's a humbling thought that this pinnacle of ancient engineering, a device of such breathtaking complexity, was lost to the sea for nearly 2,000 years, its secrets sleeping in a shipwreck, waiting to remind us that the desire to understand the cosmos is a very old, very human ache. This same spirit of playful, almost whimsical invention animated the workshops of Hero of Alexandria, a man who, in the 1st century of the Common Era, seemed to delight in making the world move with a hidden, silent breath. Step with me now into a temple courtyard, the air thick with the scent of frankincense and myrrh. You've come to purify yourself before approaching the inner sanctum, and you see a small, polished bronze vessel with a slot, not unlike a modern machine. You drop a 5 drachma coin into the slot. It lands with a soft clink on a delicately balanced pan inside. The weight of the coin, a simple everyday act, sets off a silent chain of events. The pan dips, opening a valve, and a measured, generous stream of sacred water pours from a spout into your waiting hands. The coin, having done its work, slides off the pan, the valve closes with a gentle sigh, and the flow stops. You've just used the world's first vending machine, a device that traded a small piece of silver for a moment of divine connection, all powered by nothing more than gravity and a cleverly balanced lever. It wasn't a cold commercial transaction. It was a small private miracle, a way for the temple to offer a consistent, fair blessing to everyone, without a priest needing to stand by with a jug. The machine itself was a silent, tireless acolyte, and Hero's ingenuity didn't stop at dispensing holy water. Picture the same temple, its great bronze doors. A worshipper lights a fire on a hollow, concealed altar outside. As the fire warms the air inside the altar, the air expands, pushing through a hidden pipe into a vessel of water beneath the temple floor. The pressure of the displaced water forces a heavy counterweight to descend, and through a system of pulleys and ropes, the massive temple doors swing open, slowly, majestically, as if by an unseen hand. To a visitor, it would seem the god himself was welcoming them in. When the fire dies down, the air cools and contracts, the water is drawn back, and the doors close with the same silent, solemn grace. It was a theatre of the divine, a sacred automation that used the gentle physics of hot air and water to create a moment of pure, unearthly wonder. The world was not just a place of dirt and toil. It was a place of hidden forces waiting to be coaxed into life with a little fire and a lot of cleverness. Perhaps the most charming of Hero's creations, though, was a toy. A little bauble of physics that, had history taken a slightly different turn, might have sparked a revolution. Imagine a small, sealed metal sphere, balanced on a pivot between two hollow pipes that feed steam into it. A fire is lit beneath it, the water inside boils, and from two tiny angled nozzles on the sphere's sides, jets of steam shoot out. The sphere begins to spin, slowly at first, then faster and faster, a whirling, hissing, delightful little marvel. This was the eolipile, a steam engine, a full 17 centuries before the Industrial Revolution. You could watch it spin, feel the faint warmth of the steam on your cheek, and marvel at the raw, untamed power of boiling water. It was a party trick, a philosopher's plaything, a gentle, spinning hint of a mechanical future that never quite arrived. The world had plenty of muscle, both human and animal, and the quiet, patient power of steam remained a curiosity. A beautiful, spinning what-if, its potential energy dissipating into the warm Alexandrian air like a sigh. Now, let's leave the whirring gears and hissing steam behind and step outside into the soft golden light of a late afternoon. You're in the Bruchion, the royal quarter of Alexandria, and you've just entered the grounds of the Great Library. It wasn't a single, silent building of dusty shelves, but a sprawling campus of learning, a Mauseon, a temple to the Muses. You can stroll through colonnaded walkways, the marble cool under your sandals. You pass lecture halls where the murmur of philosophical debate drifts out like the hum of bees. You wander into a garden, a carefully cultivated paradise of exotic plants, and you see, in a sun-dappled enclosure, a giraffe, its long neck swaying gently as it nibbles at the high leaves of an acacia tree. The air smells of papyrus, of blooming jasmine, and the faint, musky scent of animals from the attached zoo. You find a quiet bench in a cool, shaded portico, and a scholar hands you a papyrus scroll. As you unroll it, you notice something remarkable. The text is not a solid, breathless block of capital letters. There are small marks, dots and spaces that separate the words, that tell you where to pause, where a sentence ends. This is where punctuation was born, a quiet revolution in clarity, invented by the librarians of Alexandria to help readers navigate the collected wisdom of the world. You sit there, in the fading light, a scroll of Sappho's poetry in your hands, the words breathing on the page for the first time, and you feel a profound sense of peace. This was the true luxury of the Hellenistic world. Not just gold and silk, but the time and space to think, to read, to walk in a garden with a giraffe and ponder the shape of the earth. As dusk begins to paint the sky in shades of lavender and rose, you feel a pull toward the harbour. You walk down the Heptastadion, the long causeway linking the city to the island of Pharos, and you look up. There, at the harbour's mouth, it rises, the Pharos Lighthouse. It's not just a tower, it's a sculpted mountain of white limestone, soaring over 100 meters into the darkening sky, one of the tallest structures on the planet for centuries. Its 3 tiers, a square base, an octagonal middle, and a cylindrical top, stack upon each other like a wedding cake for a god. At its peak, a massive bronze mirror catches the last rays of the setting sun, and a great fire is being kindled behind it. Imagine you're a sailor, your small ship creaking gently on the swell, the familiar scent of home still miles away. The coast is a dark smudge, but then you see it. A beam of light, focused and intensified by the polished mirror, cuts through the twilight like a gentle, guiding finger. It sweeps across the water, a silent, powerful promise of safe harbor, of warm food, of rest. The light is said to be visible for 50 kilometers. You can almost feel the collective sigh of relief on the deck, the easing of shoulders tight from a long voyage. The Pharos was not just a wonder of engineering. It was a beacon of welcome, a star brought down to earth to guide the weary home. The fire crackles softly in your imagination, a warm, steady heart at the top of the world, its light a lullaby across the waves. Finally, let's travel north from the heat of Egypt, across the sea to the coast of Ionia in modern-day Turkey. Here, nestled on the slopes of Mount Michael, lies the city of Priene. It's a small, perfectly planned town, a jewel of Hellenistic urban design, and it holds a secret of quiet, domestic comfort. Walk with me down its main street, a broad, marble-paved avenue. You'll notice the city is laid out on a strict grid, a Hippodamian plan, with the streets oriented with a very specific purpose. The main avenues run east to west. Now, step into a typical house. You enter a central courtyard, the heart of the home, open to the sky. The north side of the courtyard is built up with the main living rooms, their doorways and large windows facing south. In the winter, the sun traces a low arc across the sky, and its gentle golden rays stream deep into these rooms, warming the stone floors and walls, filling the space with a cozy, natural heat. You can imagine sitting in a patch of sunlight, a warm cup of diluted wine in your hand, watching the dust motes dance in the beam, perfectly comfortable while a chilly wind blows outside. In the summer, the sun is high overhead, and the deep overhanging eaves of the portico cast the same rooms in cool, deep shade. The sun's rays never touch the interior, keeping the house fresh and airy. This was passive solar architecture, a quiet, brilliant dance with the seasons, designed 2,300 years ago. It required no fuel, no complex machinery, just a deep understanding of the sun's path and a desire for a gentle, sustainable comfort. The house itself was a sundial of well-being, a place where the very walls knew how to keep you warm in winter and cool in summer, a cozy stone embrace. So, as the last light fades over the harbour of Alexandria and the beam of the Pharos begins its steady, sleepless sweep, and as the winter sun warms the quiet courtyards of Priene, you can feel the texture of this later Greek world. It was a world where the human mind, with a gentle, persistent curiosity, began to unlock the secrets of steam and gears, not for industry or war, but for wonder, for convenience, for a little sacred magic. It was a world where a library was a garden, a lighthouse was a star, and a home was a partner in the rhythm of the sun. A world that, in its quiet, ingenious way, was reaching for a future of comfort and light, a future that still feels, in many ways, like a beautiful, half-remembered dream. And so, as the last light of a long Ago afternoon fades over a quiet Greek courtyard, we find ourselves at the edge of a world that once knew, with a kind of gentle certainty, how to live well. It's a world that, for all its marble temples and bronze statues, for all its noisy assemblies and clattering marketplaces, held at its heart a profound and simple secret. That the richest life is often the one that feels most like a warm bath, a thoughtful conversation, a handful of olives eaten slowly in the shade. You can almost picture it now, as your own breathing begins to slow. A small house in a town like Priene, its whitewashed walls still holding the memory of the sun, its rooms turned inward toward a courtyard where a single plane tree rustles its leaves like the pages of a well-loved book. A brazier glows softly in the corner, taking the chill off the evening air, and somewhere a friend is expected for dinner. There is no rush. There is no urgent notification pulling your attention away. There is only the quiet hum of a life arranged around the things that truly nourish, the way a garden is arranged around a spring. This was a civilization that, in its most thoughtful moments, elevated comfort, not to a guilty pleasure, but to a quiet art. The Dr. Hippocrates, whose name still echoes through our own white rooms and sterile hallways, would have looked at you not with a prescription pad, but with a calm, searching gaze. He might have advised, in that steady voice of his, a morning walk through the dewy fields outside the city walls, the kind of walk where your sandals leave faint prints in the dust, and the air tastes of wild thyme and salt from the distant sea. He would have prescribed a rub-down with warm olive oil, the kind of massage that coaxes the knots from your shoulders and leaves your skin glowing like polished wood. His medicine was not a battle against the body, but a gentle conversation with it, a coaxing back into balance. A meal of barley bread, a piece of grilled fish, a handful of fresh figs. This was a prescription for health that felt less like a doctor's visit and more like a spa day, a quiet restoration of the self in a world that understood the body as a garden to be tended, not a machine to be fixed. And at the center of this garden was a concept that still whispers to us across the centuries, a word that feels like a warm stone held in the palm of your hand. Eudaimonia. We often translate it as happiness, but that's a little like calling the ocean a puddle. It was something deeper, richer, more rooted. To the Greeks, eudaimonia was the feeling of flourishing, the way a plant unfurls its leaves toward the sun, not out of ambition or a sense of duty, but simply because it is its nature to grow, to reach, to become more fully itself. It wasn't about productivity, about checking off tasks or climbing some invisible ladder. It was about feeling your own potential unfold, quietly, steadily, like a scroll opening to reveal a poem you didn't know you had memorized. It required a bit of luck, of course. The right soil, the right weather. But it also required virtue, the kind of deep integrity that comes from knowing yourself, and friendship, the kind of bond that makes a simple meal taste like a feast. Picture two friends, reclining on a wooden couch, a bowl of olives between them, the conversation drifting from the stars to the meaning of courage. And you're picturing the very workshop of eudaimonia. It was a life where the senses and the soul were not at war, but were old, comfortable companions, walking arm in arm through a sunlit agora. Now, as you feel the soft pull of sleep beginning to wrap itself around you like a woolen cloak, you might wonder where all that comfort went. The warm baths, the cozy courtyards, the thoughtful conversations over watered wine. They didn't vanish in a single dramatic moment, like a temple struck by lightning. They faded, slowly, the way a fresco fades under centuries of sun and rain. The Middle Ages, with their own profound beauties and their own harsh necessities, saw the hypocausts grow cold. The great public baths fall silent. The private gardens give way to fortified walls. The delicate machinery of daily ease, the coin-operated water dispensers, the automatic temple doors, the little steam engines that whirred like mechanical birds, were packed away into the attic of history, their blueprints gathering dust. The world turned its attention to other things, to different kinds of light. And for a long time, the idea that a simple sensory life could be the richest of all was a whisper growing fainter. A half-remembered dream of a sun-drenched courtyard where the water in the fountain still played its quiet, liquid music. But whispers, as you know, have a way of lingering. They curl into the cracks of old stones. They hide in the margins of manuscripts. They wait. And the legacy of Greek comfort, the true legacy, was never really about the plumbing or the underfloor heating, ingenious as they were. It was about a way of being in the world, a particular tilt of the head, a certain quality of attention. It was the idea that leisure, real leisure, the kind they called cholet, was not empty time but the most precious time of all, the time in which you became most fully human. It was the conviction that a conversation with a friend, a walk in a colonnade, a quiet hour with a cup of herbal tea and a view of the hills was not a luxury but a necessity, as vital to the soul as bread is to the body. This idea never really died. It went underground, like a spring that disappears into the earth only to emerge, clear and cold, somewhere else entirely. It bubbled up in the gardens of monasteries, in the courtyards of Renaissance palaces, in the quiet corners of public parks. And it bubbles up now, tonight, in the simple act of settling into a warm bed with soft blankets, in the gentle decision to let the day's busyness dissolve into the quiet dark. Think for a moment of the Hippocratic doctor again, making his rounds not in a sterile clinic but in a sunlit room, a bowl of fresh water at his side. His prescription for a healthy life, fresh air, exercise, massage, a simple diet, was, at its heart, a prescription for paying attention. Paying attention to the way the morning light falls on the leaves, to the way your muscles feel after a long walk, to the taste of a perfectly ripe fig. It was a medicine of the senses, a reminder that the body is not a burden to be managed, but a companion to be cherished. And that, perhaps, is the quietest and most persistent whisper of all. In a world that often tells you to ignore the body's needs, to push through fatigue, to treat sleep as an interruption of productivity, the Greek voice comes through like a warm, amused chuckle from a very old friend. It says, slow down, take the walk, have the olive. The work will still be there tomorrow. But this moment, this breath, this slant of light, this is your life, and it is asking to be lived. The concept of eudaimonia, too, has a way of slipping into the quiet spaces of the modern mind. You might not use the word, but you know the feeling. It's the feeling of a day spent doing something you love, not because you have to, but because it makes you feel more like yourself. It's the feeling of a deep conversation that leaves you both tired and strangely refreshed, as if you've been walking together through a beautiful landscape. It's the feeling of sitting in a patch of sun, a cat curled nearby, a book open on your lap, and realizing that, in this moment, you have everything you need. The Greeks would have recognized that feeling instantly. They would have nodded, smiled, and poured you a cup of wine mixed with water, and they would have said, "Yes, this is it. This is the good life. Not the loud life, not the crowded life, but the life that fits you like a well-worn tunic. The life that allows your potential to unfold as naturally as a flower opening to the morning." And so, as you lie here, on the threshold of sleep, you are participating in a legacy that stretches back through the centuries. A legacy not of marble and bronze, but of quiet, sensory wisdom. The cozy courtyard, the warm bath, the thoughtful conversation. These were once the everyday luxuries of a world that knew how to live well, and they are still available to you, in different forms, tonight. Your bed is your courtyard, a safe, soft space sheltered from the noise of the world. The warmth of your blankets is your bath, a gentle heat that eases the tension from your limbs. And the quiet drift of your own thoughts as they begin to blur and soften at the edges is your symposium. A gentle conversation with yourself, a letting go of the day's arguments and anxieties. The Greeks understood that the end of the day was a sacred time, a time to give the mind and body back to the quiet, to let the soul stretch out and sigh like a cat finding the warmest spot by the fire. Behind all the philosophy and the politics, behind the grand ideas that still shape our world, were people doing what humans have always done. Seeking warmth, seeking connection, seeking a moment of peace in a busy world. They worried about their children, they laughed at bad jokes, they savored the first sip of wine after a long day. They looked up at the same moon you might see through your window, and they felt, as you might feel now, a sense of wonder and smallness and quiet gratitude. Their world has faded, its colors softened by time, its music grown faint. But the best of it, the coziest of it, the most human of it, remains. It's a whisper in the dark, a gentle hand on your shoulder, an invitation to rest. So tonight, as you settle into your warm bed with soft blankets, let the last thought of ancient Greece be not of ruins and dust, but of a small whitewashed house with a courtyard open to the stars. Picture the embers of a brazier glowing softly, the scent of jasmine on the night air, the distant sound of the sea. Picture a friend just leaving, the warmth of the conversation still hanging in the air like a pleasant echo. And picture yourself, not as a distant observer, but as a part of that long, unbroken chain of people who have sought and found a simple, sensory richness in the quiet hours. The examined life is not a chore, it is a comfort. The good life is not a distant goal. It is this moment, this breath, this gentle letting go. The legacy of ancient Greece is, in the end, a lullaby, sung in a language you already know, reminding you that you are allowed to rest, to flourish, to simply be. Close your eyes and drift off. Good night.